Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back into the Buster Show. Today, we have a repeat guest, a very rare occurrence that is kept for only the most special people. Because today, we have Robert Freund back on the show. Robert, how are you?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me back. It's awesome to get that repeat invite. I appreciate it.
Of course, of course. My favorite legal expert.
Yeah, great title to hold. I know there's a lot of competition for that.
I want to dive right in. We'll give a quick context as to who you are and what you do, but I think a lot of it, will sort of be explained through talking about some of the stories, particularly pertaining to social media and the legalities behind it. But in short, how would you describe yourself?
Say I'm an advertising lawyer and I help e-commerce brands and anyone involved in selling anything online keep their money. So instead of being involved in litigation and dealing with lawsuits, my goal is to help brands, agencies, and individual creators keep the money that they've earned and focus on what they're there to do, which is their business.
And then a quick recap. In our last episode together, we talked a lot about celebrities being sued for using their own photos, which the responses that I got to that were amazing and also scary because just about every influencer has done that at one point or another, whether it be photos that friends have taken or just people they didn't know have taken, photographers at events. I've probably done it if you look at my profile, so that is a really crazy subject, but there is some relief in the sense of eh, people aren't going after, they're only going after like I don't remember who the example was, but like a Rihanna type.
Mm. Yeah, I mean that gets into the issue of publicity rights. The concept is that every person, celebrity or not, has the right to control how their name, image, and likeness is used commercially. So if somebody takes a picture of me and runs it in an ad or posts it on their brand's Instagram page and they didn't get my permission first, they've violated my publicity right. And so the cases that make the headlines involve celebrities because they're kind of easy targets and presumably have deep pockets and will sell for more than maybe somebody else. But or I'm sorry, I'm saying that backwards. They make headlines well because they're interesting, um, but it's a mistake to think that it's just celebrities that have to worry about that issue because it applies to everybody's celebrity or not, at least in California. And
Mhm.
it's one of those laws that's so on the side of the individual, again, at least in California's situation, like you don't have to be famous whatsoever. You don't even have to prove that you were damaged at all by someone taking your image. And there's a minimum amount of money you're entitled to, plus mandatory attorney's fees, which is a rare thing in the law. Like the default rule is that each side has to pay their own attorney's fees at the end of the case, win or lose. So, even if you mount a successful defense, you have to pay for your attorney at the end of the case. That's the default rule, and it only changes in some limited circumstances. This is one of those limited circumstances where if you win, you get your attorney's fees as the plaintiff, which makes it way more attractive to want to file that lawsuit because it's not complicated to prove. You used my picture in an ad. That's not that complex an idea to wrap your mind around. And if you're a lawyer representing that person, it's like there's a much bigger settlement already on the table, at least leverage wise, because there's that attorney's fees hook. So the headlines are about celebrities, but ordinary people bring these kinds of lawsuits all the time. So it's
Totally.
interesting.
When it comes to photography though, if somebody sent me the photo, like they sent it to me with intentions of me posting it, that
Mhm.
pretty much puts me in the clear, right?
So that's interesting. So from the photographer's perspective, they're looking at the copyright issue. So when somebody posts a picture of themselves, assuming like, well, I'm in the picture, so I must have the right to do whatever I want with it. That's getting into the issue that's separate from publicity rights, which is who has the copyright in that image. And the default position is that whoever hits that shutter button on the camera has the right to the photo, regardless of the subject of the photo. So a sort of extreme example is like if I handed you my phone to take a picture of me, you have the copyright in that photo and not me, unless we have some kind of agreement.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, the cases I posted about, I think the most recent one is Emily Ratajkowski being sued by the paparazzi who took the photo of her that she posted. And she's arguing that the reason she posted it was to make commentary on the fact that paparazzi are following her around everywhere. And so she's trying to say, she's putting forth a sort of fair use defense to why she posted that photograph. And that one will be interesting to watch, because it seems like she's trying to actually fight it rather than just settle, which is what a lot of these end up doing, which means we don't get sort of satisfying rulings about who's right when they settle, of course, but it seems so far at least she's been trying to defend it, so we'll see.
Well, that's interesting. I wonder, have you heard of the most extreme example I've ever heard of that? Doesn't actually relate to a human. Have you heard the monkey example of the monkey who got the rights to the photo? So there's a
I, I
story.
haven't heard
There's a
about that.
story of somebody told me this when I was talking to them about a charity project, and they, I guess there was a camera. I don't know if it was in the zoo or in the jungle, and a monkey went up to the camera and took a selfie.
Mhm.
The person whose camera it was, assumed that that was his photo because it was
Right.
his camera. And then I forget the animal organization, Peter, something like that. They determined that the monkey actually owned the rights to the likeness and license of the image, and the guy lost everything. He lost all like the money he made from the photo, like everything. It's the craziest thing ever. Yeah.
I'll have to look that up when we're done with this.
Yeah.
That is outrageous.
I know. Because it was a serious question, because I was talking about putting a camera in the ocean, and
Uh,
I seriously asked the guy that I was talking to, I was like, if a shark comes, does the shark then own the likeness to the video that we're taking? Like, how do you bring the shark into court? Like, how does
yeah,
that,
right.
how does
You
that
wheel the bank in there,
communication?
I guess.
There are some communication barriers there.
Yeah, there's been a lot written about legal rights extended to animals, and there's actually a course I took. One of the electives in law school was called animal law, and it sort of got into that. Like books have been written about extending limited legal rights to chimpanzees and related apes and stuff
God.
like that. And it's like I mean, they're pretty much at this point purely intellectual arguments, but it comes up in court from time to time. Like I remember some of the cases we talked about in that book had to do with like SeaWorld keeping whales in captivity, and should you extend some kind of limited personal rights to animals? But the idea of like publicity rights with a monkey, I think that's more of a reach than I've heard of before. So that's
Yeah,
interesting.
no, I do really like personal rights when it comes to like there are some animals that some of these I know a great white shark is an example. If you put a great white shark in captivity, it dies.
Right.
So of course there should be laws that prevent people from killing great white sharks for
Right.
entertainment's sake.
Right.
Um, so in terms of that, I think there's a great point to be made. But like you said, when it comes to other things
Intellectual property rights, I think,
like
might be a
like the
little
right
bit
to
of a stretch
vote,
right now.
I don't
Yeah.
think that whales should
Of
have the
course.
right to vote. Personally, somebody's
Yeah.
probably going to disagree with me, but I don't think whales should have the right to vote.
Yeah. Yeah. Not yet, at least. They're not there yet.
Not until they can articulate why they're voting for said candidate.
Right. Well,
Somebody,
that's more than a lot of people can do right now. So maybe that's too much of the standard.
maybe whales should be able to vote. Maybe.
Yeah. On second thought, let them know.
Um, I want to talk about a case that you recently posted on your Instagram. Rihanna got sued for using a song in a Fenty Instagram video. What was the context there, and what happened?
Yeah, so Rihanna operates a page about her Fenty brand, and she posted basically just like a short video post that was an ad on that page. And she used a song from this artist that I had not heard of before. I think a lot of people weren't super familiar with this group. And the allegation is that this is not a song that she had the license to use. And it's not like she pulled it from a sort of database that already has releases from the artists in there. Like when you use a song that's on TikTok, those are all, you have the license to use songs that are in their library on your TikTok because TikTok has gone through the work of clearing all that for that purpose. And the claim is Rihanna didn't have any kind of rights release like that with respect to the song that's in that Instagram video. And so if that's true, that's a pretty open and shut copyright infringement case because, you know, a large part of the song was in that video. It played throughout the entire video. And that's the kind of thing that an artist would expect to be compensated for. But, you know, expectation aside, that would be a clear copyright case if all of that is true. The case is just at the opening stage. They filed a complaint. Rihanna hasn't responded yet. So we'll see what happens with that. You know, her response is coming up in a few weeks, I believe, is the due date. And I like to keep track of these things and post updates when they happen. So I'll be looking out for that one and see how she handles it. You know, it might be one of the vast majority of cases that just sort of settles quietly, or she might maybe the way it's framed in the complaint isn't totally accurate and she has some kind of defense to it. But it's an interesting issue because, well, for a lot of reasons, but there is so much commentary out there from people who heard about this case saying, well, this is such amazing publicity for this unknown artist to be in a Rihanna ad. Like, I can't believe they're suing about this. They should be so grateful. And that's when you think about it, it's like, yeah, that's fair enough. That's massive exposure for somebody that probably no one would be talking about. You know, no offense to that group, but certainly much fewer people would be talking about this if it weren't for Rihanna. But at the same time, you know, if you don't always police your intellectual property rights, then what happens if you do get big and someone else smaller than Rihanna rips you off and you have this track record of just letting people do that? That can become a problem for you. So it's like the classic we should reform copyright laws because they're too restrictive kind of situation where you have somebody that you could argue is just out for wants to get a handout from Rihanna, but on the other side, it's like, well, you know, people should not just expect to take exposure as payment.
Right. Unless it's previously disclosed, right?
Right. Yeah.
So to come full circle on the monkey, I Googled it. And the top search result is the photographer whose camera was used by a monkey to take the selfie won a 2-year legal battle against animal rights group over copyright of an image. PETA sued on
All right.
behalf of the monkey in 2015, seeking financial control of the photographs for the benefit of monkey. So I guess he lost because he had to put up with the case, but he won the case.
Yeah, I mean, I hope the monkey can afford PETA's legal fees. I guess they took it pro bono probably, but you got to wonder about the attorneys working on that. Like, I understand that they were probably filing that lawsuit just to make a point and sort of like push and see where we are in the system in terms of even entertaining that kind of thing. But you got to wonder whether everybody
It's a long
involved.
time.
Yeah, I mean, in the context of litigation generally, that's not an insane amount of time, but I wonder about all the staff involved in working on that case. Like, what are we doing? But yeah, I mean, there's some value in exploring where the limits are with respect to new ideas like that, but I think it's probably the right result in the end.
But if you're the guy who's getting sued, he doesn't get any of that money back that he had to spend on legal fees, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not great for him. He could potentially, I'd have to see like what happened in the case. I mean, there are situations where even if it's not provided for in the statute, you can try to get a recovery if it was filed frivolously. And in some copyright cases, you can get awards of attorney's fees. But yeah, I'm not, without knowing really what happened there, I'm not sure if that's available to him.
That's
But yeah, I'm sure that that was not that guy's favorite 2 years. I mean, come on. Who would ever expect that?
yeah, that's crazy. That's
Yeah.
something to be careful of when you have monkeys your camera. Could you
Now we know.
like what? Think about the flip side of that. Imagine suing the monkey. Like,
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how you even serve that guy with papers. He's in the zoo, so it's probably hard to get in there, you know?
totally,
Yeah.
totally. But I mean, that's the opposite, but which inherently means it's not that far off.
Yeah, I mean, people have sued for much more insane stuff than that because there's nobody really checking the door about whether a lawsuit is completely insane at the time you file it. Like basically you can present the court clerk with anything and they have to stamp it and then you deal with whether it's completely off the wall or not. But people file stuff you wouldn't believe every single day.
The craziest thing that you've ever seen filed, that you're just like, what the hell are these people thinking?
I've seen a lot of, and I don't want to like criticize the people that much. And fortunately, like I haven't been in the kind of office ever that would see that much insane stuff. But I've seen a few where people are like extremely firm believers in the idea of being a sovereign citizen, where like you believe that none of the federal laws apply to you. You don't have to pay taxes. Like there's no such thing as the government and so on. And it happens a lot, unfortunately, in situations like home foreclosures or other credit stuff where they'll sue a bank and saying like you can't do whatever it is that you're trying to do because like the law doesn't apply to me basically. And they're pretty good at like there's whole communities about this and they're pretty good at just like putting together hundreds and hundreds of pages of what they think supports their case about how, you know, just because they were born here doesn't mean they're subject to the law and all this. So like dealing with that is, I think it's partially intentionally designed to drive you crazy, just trying to figure out what they're saying. But yeah, I mean that's probably the outer limit of stuff that I've personally come across.
That's a rough. So essentially, they think they're God.
Well, they just think that like their interpretation of history means that the law doesn't apply to them, and
Their interpretation of what are we doing here?
yeah, I know.
Crazy.
I don't have a lot of sympathy for that position, obviously. But there's people out there that truly believe that stuff, and
Amazing.
yeah,
Representation.
yeah. I mean, I've seen people file stuff that's just like loaded with profanity and like telling the judge to do this and that. I've shared a couple of those on my story from time to time because like they make the rounds every once in a while. But somebody had like I don't know if I'm allowed to curse on this show or not.
You can say anything.
Okay. There's somebody who filed in federal court a notice to fuck this court and everything it stands for. And it was like 4 or 5 pages of like telling the judge he's old and dumb and like and all this stuff. And it was like, it's just so much, it's so shockingly funny to see it like formatted as a legal document and like actually filed in all seriousness. I mean, that's somebody who didn't have a lawyer, I think, obviously, because nobody's going to lose their life.
His lawyer.
Yeah, maybe. But yeah, I like rereading that one from time to time just because it's like it's so insane.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
What are the legalities in terms of profanity in court? Are there any, or you can just say,
Yeah,
get on the bad side?
There are rules about how you conduct yourself in a courtroom and before a judge, and you can be held in contempt of court, which can be like a sort of criminal penalty. I mean, you can spend time in jail for a contempt of court. So it doesn't, you really have to act out to be in that kind of situation, but it happens. You know, people start swearing at judges and the judge gives them warnings. And then, you know, next thing you know, you're spending a day or two in jail for contempt or whatever it is. again, that's something that's never happened that's usually in the criminal context. I haven't seen anybody engage in that kind of stuff in a civil case I've been involved in, but it does happen. And certainly if I wanted to have that happen, I'd probably say that kind of stuff first in a filing.
Well, the crazy videos, like I used to watch them on YouTube. You binge watch those like court fight videos or whatever, where people
Yeah.
are just brawling at each other.
There's one where a guy fought a judge. Like the judge invited the guy
No.
to, you want to go in the hallway? He fought the lawyer. Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
I would,
Yeah.
I
I'll
would,
send it to you after this. It's incredible.
I would buy the pay-per-view for that fight. As long as
Yeah.
nobody gets hurt, there's an official, gloves, head. I would pay for that fight.
Yeah. I mean, you're already in court too. So if it gets too out of hand, like you can figure it out.
Hey, that's not a bad point.
Yeah.
Ancestry.com sued for using yearbook photos without people's permission. Would
Right.
they use it in advertisements or just on their site?
So it was in advertisements. That's the claim. So this gets back to the publicity rights issue. The people who are suing are saying like these are yearbook photos of me. It's clearly identifiable as being me, and I didn't give you permission to use my picture in your ads. And so this case is at the stage where Ancestry's filed a response, and there will be a couple more briefs that are submitted before the judge rules on it. But Ancestry is trying to say, first of all, you guys already put these yearbook photos in the public domain and they're already out there. And so we're not using them for a commercial purpose beyond what you've already put out in the space. They're trying to say that, these are yearbook photos that were already made public. And so we're just redistributing information that's already public. They're trying to say that there's no commercial value associated with their use of the yearbook photos because the product isn't a yearbook. It's finding out information about your past. And so, the amount, to the extent we even used your picture, it doesn't matter. It's a thorny situation for them for the reason that these kinds of publicity rights cases, historically, they're so easy to bring. They're not usually that complicated to establish. And like I mentioned, there's the sort of carrot on the stick of attorney's fees at the end if you bring them. And in this case, you've got a class of plaintiffs. There's so many people that have yearbook photos used that you're effectively multiplying whatever the damages are across all of those people. And so the potential liability for Ancestry is pretty big. But I'm personally very interested in seeing how the court rules on this one, because if it's in favor of Ancestry.com, that has the potential to arm businesses that are faced with similar lawsuits with better law to use in defense if Ancestry's arguments carry the day. But I think the real reason I posted that, and like the takeaway for most businesses, is just be careful about using a picture of anybody in your advertisement, and putting it on your website is going to be treated as advertising. So it comes up a lot in like customer testimonials. Like, let's say there's a review that you find somewhere online, like from a blogger or something, or on somebody's Facebook, and you want to use that review on your website about your product. If you take that review and use that picture's photo or their full name and you don't have their permission, you have a potential publicity rights case on your hands. So it's one of those things that seems so innocent. Like, this is somebody who already has their name online and loved my product. Why can't I just showcase that?
Right.
You have to be careful about how and where you do it.
Well, the interesting thing is, right, like if they get got for it, let's say, they lose whatever that case is, then in my eyes, they have to now, like, the only company that could feasibly do something like that would be a company that has everybody put in the photos themselves, like a Facebook or an Instagram, one of these social platforms. So if I were them, and there was no other way, because the photos are so essential for that site and that product, partner with one of the social media apps, because they have the rights to the photos if people click a box. Right.
Right. The problem with that at first, though, is when you sign up for Facebook or Instagram or something like that, it's not clear that you are giving a release of your license for Facebook to then share with every other business to use absolutely however they want. And
Right.
so I would want to look back over Facebook's terms again. It's been a little while, but I I doubt that when you sign up, you're saying Facebook can use your image in partnership with any brand in the world for whatever purpose. So there are ways that a business could comply with the requirements that you need to appropriately use someone's photo. You know, if somebody signs up, you can have in your terms of service, assuming you draft them in a way that's enforceable, that, you know, by signing up and providing your name and picture, you agree that we can use it for X, Y, and Z purpose. And so that's pretty much like the standard way to use user generated content if you're worried about, well, not if you're worried about, to make sure that you don't get into a publicity rights kind of issue.
Right. That ancestry.com is a tricky one too, because more than half the people on the site are dead. Right.
Right.
So
Right.
you can't really get their permission.
Yeah, and these people were saying like, we're not even members of this site, and yet you're advertising that somebody can sign up to see my information, and the way that you're advertising that is through using my photo. So
It does sound messed up when you put it like that.
right, I mean, there's a compelling case to be made on their side, and I think that Ancestry's arguments so far are also, I mean, they're not nothing. They're well thought out. They're supported by as similar cases as you can get, and so it really will be an interesting one to see what happens in a month or so.
Hmm. So this next one, I know people are gonna get a kick out of. Gamers sued EA for not disclosing why Madden is so difficult. Is there any rhyme or reason to that suit? Because it sounds
Yeah,
ridiculous and like they just lost a bad game.
it does sound crazy, and I admit to using a little bit of a clickbaity title for that one, but only because like I'm trying to summarize the issue in, 10 words or whatever. What they're suing about is the fact that Madden and other EA games will sort of dynamically change the difficulty on you as you play. And the argument is like, you advertise realism in your games. That's a big part of why people buy NHL, and Madden is, it's not a perfect simulation, but there's a bit of, if I play with this team that has higher ranking, they're going to perform better. Like
Right.
my entire FIFA team is made up of people with a certain points ranking that's higher than others. You should expect that they'll win and not just get smoked because the game has decided it's time for you to lose. That's like an extreme way of putting it. But, you remember like back in original NBA Jam, if you're winning too much, like the game will suddenly become amazing and smoke you. And like the same with NFL Blitz. And so it's sort of the same thing here where they're saying like, you give me this team manager feature and you allow me to put people on my team with like a 91 ranking, and now in the middle of this game I'm losing to players with like 70 ranking. This is not what I signed up for. And so the claim is like, this is false advertising because you're switching the rules on me, and I wouldn't have bought it if I had known that this kind of thing was going on. So that's a big part of what that case is about.
That's crazy. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
mean, I understand the frustration when it comes to, um, like playing professionally and that being your career, and then, the different levels of it not being disclosed. But
yeah, I think part of what they're trying to get at also is, I haven't played FIFA in ages, but I think there's some mechanism in the game where you can unlock different player cards and add them to a team, and at some point there becomes a microtransaction aspect to it where you can pay some amount of money for the opportunity to get better player cards or something like that. And the idea is now you're asking people to give up money or additional money in addition to the price of the game, in hopes of being able to perform better in the game, and that performance is not as promised. I agree that it's like, at first blush, it's like dude, you bought a video game, like, and it's hard. How are you going to court over this? But there's been a lot of legal attention to the concept of loot boxes in video games, where people don't really know the odds of the reward they're going to get when they make like a $1 or even less transaction to try to get some perk. And so the FTC's been taking a look at loot boxes. They've had workshops just about that concept in video games, about, is this illegal gambling? How much more do we need to regulate this? And anytime the government takes a hard look at something, usually there's private lawsuits that follow, sort of either, drafting behind them or piggybacking or whatever. So there's probably some element of that here, where the plaintiffs are thinking, all right, this kind of seems like a variety of that issue where I'm not totally sure what I'm paying for, and that's unfair. It's just in the context of, it looks like I'm just pissed that I'm not good at Madden, which is like certainly part of it. But
Hmm.
yeah, to be fair, like there's more to it than that. But
Of course.
yeah,
A topic that I'm so glad that I remembered, even though it's like the biggest story in the last 2 weeks in the whole world. Um, Trump is no longer a Twitter user. Um,
yeah,
do you think that that is, uh, I know people like obviously, I think like 70 million people voted for him. So obviously 70 million people disagree with that choice, but it's totally within Twitter's legal rights to do that. But do you think now that, like the fact that like Twitter has like dictators and crazy people on the platform, that they should sort of keep that same energy across the board for, some of these other people that are doing or have done similar things to what Trump did to get removed? Or how do you sort of look at that as from a legal standpoint of, can other people make a case against Twitter for not doing things across the board?
yeah. I mean, you've hit on the exact issue that is at the front of all this discussion over Section 230, and are big tech companies taking advantage of the way that law is applied right now to have unfair censorship power. And it's an enormous question. And the biggest issue is, like, are they being consistent in how they regulate the content on their platform? And should we modify or revise the law to help make sure that things are done more equitably across the board? It's the kind of thing that you could spend, and people have spent, months debating, what should we do about this? Because right now, basically what Section 230 does is, it's some people feel very strongly that it's the law that allows the internet to operate. Because what it does is, it says, if you have an interactive service, if you provide an interactive service online, you are not responsible, you're not potentially liable for content that's shared on that service that's created by somebody else. That's what you can argue allows us to have things like Wikipedia. If somebody goes on and edits a page to say something defamatory, Wikipedia should not and can't be liable for that under Section 230. They have that immunity. And if they didn't, then, I mean, the effects of that, there's so many to talk about, but it would make content moderation arguably impossible. And the liability exposure for somebody who's just hosting other people's created content would be out of control. So, I mean, at least that's my take on it. Section 230, the premise of it is a good thing. I don't think it should be totally repealed. I think revisions are appropriate. But that's sort of the basis of it. And in addition to not being liable for allowing content to be up on the service platform, they're also not liable for deleting content. And that's why, to sort of go off on a side thing for a second, that's why when people come to me and say, my Instagram was disabled, can I sue Instagram? The answer is, unfortunately, right now, categorically no, because it's just up to them what is on the platform. And there's other reasons for that, for why you can't do that. The terms of service say they can disable you at any time. But
it's like a girlfriend and a boyfriend. You can't sue your partner for breaking up with you.
people have tried that. People have tried that a lot. But
Really?
oh yeah,
No.
yes, people have sued their ex-boyfriends and girlfriends for, emotional distress and breaking up with them and all this kind of stuff. That goes back to the point of like anybody can file any lawsuit they want. They may not get very far, but
Thank God I'm in the clear there.
right. But yeah, I mean the debate around how much power should these platforms have in terms of picking and choosing what stays up and what goes down, it's it's such a complicated question. And I I I think that if you have a standard of what's acceptable on your platform, you should apply it equally. That's a huge task, though, when you talk about how many users are on a platform. How can you possibly police everything? Who is making these judgment calls as to what's okay and what's not? The idea of banning a sitting president from Twitter is obviously a huge moment, and it really puts into focus the kind of issues we're talking about when you talk about reforming Section 230 and all that. So I don't know where that's going to land, but it's certainly fascinating to watch.
It's really crazy. It's like the more you think about how big that decision, and not just Twitter, every platform subsequently
Right,
banned
right.
it, including like Shopify. I didn't even
I
know he was
know.
using Shopify. I mean, maybe he was for his
That's
website.
interesting.
I don't know.
Yeah,
But just the way you just put it, like a sitting president banned from his means of communication with the public.
yeah,
Holy cow! And
yeah. I mean,
Obama was the first social media president, but even Obama, like I know his iPhone didn't even have any apps. Like I don't even know if it had internet access on his phone.
right,
He had like the apps that the iPhone comes with, like the health app, the calculator, and then like some games, I think. you know,
yeah.
Whereas Trump was definitely a free soul when it came to what was on his phone.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, the sheer volume of tweets was like, don't you have a country like? Don't you have other stuff to do? I was always just I don't know if impressed is the right word, but like, wow, this guy puts out a lot of tweets.
Honest.
Like,
Yeah, they said at the beginning of his presidency that he would do it from the toilet, but
yeah,
that would mean that he was spending a lot of time in the
yeah, yeah.
bathroom.
But yeah, I mean, I think that decision, especially from Twitter, it was a wake up call for a lot of people to think about the issue of like, look at what these platforms can do. You can just be in a day completely done here on Twitter and other platforms, and no matter who you are. So there's, I think, appropriately a lot of concern about, well, what would happen if a sort of slippery slope argument of what happens if these tech companies just decide they don't like an entire line of argument or an entire viewpoint, and they just suddenly they decide that that's not good for the platform. That's the kind of concern that you get, especially from the right side of the country, the right leaning side of the country. And yeah, I mean, it's just such a complicated issue. I can't claim to be the expert or predict what will happen.
Right. Are you familiar with what, like, if somebody is a president, like let's use Obama as an example, um, are there certain levels of immunity that you just get from having been a president, or once your terms are done, you're the same as everybody else? Do you get any special benefits, or can anybody sue you just like the rest?
It's a good question. I don't want to say, I'm always like really reluctant to say what the answer is if I'm not totally sure. I know that, of course, while you're in office, you have immunity from being sued. But in terms of acts that you did while you were in office after your term ends, I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, it's crazy. Um, that would be wild if you had immunity for life from being president.
Yeah, I think there would be some bad incentives there for sure.
Oh my.
But I'd want to look it up before I say yes or no, because I know people will call me out for it if I'm wrong.
No, that's crazy. Um, what else do we want to talk about here? Oh, this is interesting. Bumble paid out $22.5 million to settle a case about unclear subscription terms. So these
Yeah.
Bumble, Tinder, Raya, all of these dating apps, right? They're very confusing to me in the sense of like if you go on like a sports gambling app, right? Like a FanDuel, and you put in money and you're like consistently going, there will be like notifications that come up to like keep you sane, like from not spending too much. And there will be warnings. You can set limits and stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
Um, with dating apps, none of that. Like
Right.
you got the boosts, a buddy, we call them boosties. You got the boosties, and then you've got your subscriptions, and then you've got all your different things in here and there. I don't even
Yep.
use most of them. I don't think I've ever been on Bumble, but it's really crazy how little is disclosed. And then to see this, I want to ask what the sort of context is here. I think it has to do with automatic renewals, but
Mhm.
what happened?
Yeah. So there's laws about when you offer somebody what's called an automatic renewal program, where somebody is automatically charged unless they take some affirmative step to cancel. It's like a classic subscription model. There are laws about what the customer needs to see before they submit their billing information. They need to see the terms of, when they're going to be charged, how much they're going to be charged, how they can cancel, and there's different requirements based on the state that you're in or what state's law applies. But basically, you need to have the terms up front. You need to know when you can cancel by and how to do it, and so on. And in California, there's additional rules like when you sign up for a subscription, you need to receive an acknowledgement email that goes over all the terms again and shows you how to cancel. There needs to be a way for you to cancel online if you signed up online, and so on. And it's a big area of litigation because a lot of brands, big and small, screw up the disclosure requirements and the acknowledgement and so on. And that's part of what happened here with Bumble was when you signed up for whatever their premium recurring automatically billed feature was, there weren't those disclosures at the time. There, you weren't told how to cancel. You weren't really told when you would be charged. And so that was just ripe for this class action, which ended up settling for, a significant amount of money. But it's the kind of thing that, Bumble is by no means alone here. These kinds of cases are filed all the time, especially in California. California sees so many of these consumer protection class action lawsuits because it's such a consumer friendly state. Like California has some of the most consumer friendly, protective, you could say anti-business laws on the books, and courts are much more consumer leaning in those cases than elsewhere in the country. So Bumble screwed this one up in a big public way, but tons and tons of businesses face these kinds of lawsuits just because they're, most of the time just not aware of what they need to do before somebody submits their payment information.
That's crazy for companies as big as that not to have people like yourself or anybody for that matter involved in, at least from a consulting perspective,
Yeah,
is
it's like it's. I think about that a lot too, and and people say that like, how can a company this big and this sophisticated? It's not like Bumble came out, 2 years ago. They've been around. How could they miss this? I think it's a combination of things. It's one, there's so much compliance work and legal compliance that needs to be done for a company that size that sometimes things just slip through the cracks. I think probably in this situation, the marketing and app development team is not always running everything by legal before it goes live. And it was probably just one of those things that got pushed out without somebody who really needed to take time to put eyes on it, putting eyes on it. And it's possible that, I'm totally speculating, but it's possible that Bumble's legal team was totally on top of these issues from a not consulting is not the right word, but it's possible they had training about this. Like, here's what we need to do when we roll out subscriptions, and somebody just missed the memo when they were developing this and putting it out. It's totally possible that happened.
Well, that dude's not working there anymore.
He wasn't happy to learn about this.
He's over at Tinder now.
Yeah.
No, I can only imagine the difficulties that you would run across legally with a dating app.
Yeah. Yeah, there's actually specific laws that apply to dating apps that also add additional steps that you need to take when you're running subscription, like paid premium services about them. And I, I, I don't want to say exactly what the cause of that was. Like, why did the legislature sit down and say, you know what, we really need to put dating app laws on the books? But I know that when the FTC does their like year in review scam report, where they talk about like how much money was lost to fraud this past year, what were the big areas of, what were the big topics or contexts in which fraud happened, romance scams is always in the top three. So it's possible it came from that. Yeah, like people get swindled out of money on just being catfished and like fake promises of meeting up and all this all the time, and it's wild to me. Like, I know somebody I went to school with who is by no means a dumb person was posting on Facebook about how he got defrauded out of, I think it was close to $10,000, basically just being catfished online. And it's like, this
How
is
does
this
that
is
happen though? How do you give somebody money who you've never met?
I know it's one of those things that's really hard for me to understand how you would be in that situation. But, and I also sort of questioned this guy's decision to post it on Facebook and tell everybody like, hey, I got defrauded by a catfish. But yeah, I mean, it happens all the time, and it's not just like the kinds of people maybe you would envision being susceptible to this kind of thing. It's like widespread.
It's beyond me. That's crazy.
Yeah,
I mean, I've seen, I understand it while also not understanding it. Yeah,
right. Me
that
too.
that's a tricky one.
Yeah, you read the FTC's guides that they put out, or you know, how to stay safe online, and they'll say things like, "Don't send money to a romantic interest if you haven't, you know, met them." And it's like, yeah, duh, right? Like, of course, don't do that. But it's still, you know, year after year, a huge issue.
And don't send any money to those Nigerian princes trying to come to
Right.
the States. All of them.
Yeah, unless they sound legit, in which case, of course.
Please invite them to your home.
Yeah, unless they say they have millions of dollars for you, in which case, of course, can't
Yeah, of
afford not to. Yeah.
course, of course. That's pretty much everything. Where can people find you best?
Most active on Instagram at Robert Freund Law. I just joined Clubhouse a couple of days ago, and I'm
Hey,
trying to spend more time on there. It's super addicting and like can become a total time suck, but it's fun. So Instagram's probably where I'm most active. You can also find me on LinkedIn and on my website and all that.
be
And
careful on Clubhouse. There's a lot of regurgitation
that's
that
for
people
sure.
think is new information. That's what happened
That's
to me. I spent the first week I was on there, 10 hours a day I spent on the app while I'm working, phone's open. And then I got to like day 3, 4, 5, and I was like, oh, everybody's just telling the same stories over and over again, and I'm learning nothing. So
yeah.
I'm much more selective now with where I spend my time on Clubhouse. So that's the best advice I can give in terms of app time.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I've seen that too, like especially in the huge rooms that stay up for days at a time. It's just like every time you jump in, it's somebody talking about like how to figure out how to start your business. And it's like this, which is great, a course worthy topic that is worth learning about. But yeah, I feel like the huge rooms just sort of repeat the same 5 or 6 greatest hits. And then the smaller rooms are where you actually get
Yeah,
do it.
a lot of these people are entrepreneur one hit wonders when it comes to advice.
Yeah, yeah, that's for sure.
Awesome. All right, thank you, brother. I'm sure we will be back for your three-peat.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. Hope we do.
Awesome. All
All
right,
right.
perfect. See you guys next time.
Yeah.
Peace.